Sam Gallardo.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's great.
Okay. Well, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate you taking the time and sitting down and have a conversation with me.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that. Some of my favorite kind of going off on tangent theological conversations have been with you.
Oh, cool.
So it's like we get into all sorts of random Bible stuff and characters and different types of faith and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I really enjoyed some of the conversations we've had.
Oh yeah, me too. I had a lot of fun ones with you.
Yeah. So I just kind of want to start with how we know each other.
Yeah, yeah.
So we were introduced through a mutual friend. It was probably like a year ago, right?
Yeah.
It's been quite a while.
Yes.
And so that friend used to he was like the business management advertisement guy at the company I worked for. Yep, marketing, stuff like that. And he was also, at the time, your roommate.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And so he kind of, I think we had each individually talked to him about faith and about the Bible and stuff like that. And so he had the good idea of just kind of, letting us meet.
Yeah.
So so he did that, and that was, like I mentioned, like a year ago. And then we've also kind of got together through some other friends at like a little book club Bible study thing. And so we've got to.
And then the Bible study that you brought me to, were with David and his.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've got to hang out a little bit over the last year, and so I know a little bit about you, and I always thought you were very knowledgeable of the Bible, very interesting guy, really kind of, I don't know, understood what you believed and why you believed it. And I always had just a lot of questions about the Bible and about faith and stuff like that. And so in some aspects, you were kind of like a mentor almost to me in that.
Yeah, I feel like really quickly I wasn't sure how much you knew. And every time I would see you, it was like you just knew more. And then you would be like, oh yeah, I was reading Jeremiah recently. I was reading this recently, and I'd be like, yeah, you quickly got to the point where I was like, oh yeah, I just respect you now, and I'm curious to see what you think about stuff, because I know you're reading and you're learning a lot.
Yeah,
and you're talking to a lot of people.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was ever since I had my experience in the fall of 2023, I've just been captivated with all of it. I want to hear about debates and discussions and read different books, and obviously read the Bible and hear different perspectives, and now I'm kind of diving into church history and stuff like that. So there's a lot of layers to it.
Yeah, I think
it's fascinating.
It's funny because the first time we met was actually at that place, at that job, and you just were are you a Christian? And yeah. So we just started talking really quickly about it.
Yeah.
But then when we first met with that friend, I felt like it was a little bit contentious, but I felt like we both handled it really well. And I was actually really proud of myself for how I handled it, of not just becoming argumentative.
Oh yeah, I can imagine I was for sure very, you're wrong and this is why.
No, I feel like you were very just questioning and just trying to ask good questions and let me understand why you're saying what you're saying. And that was really cool. But I know I could get to the point where I'm just no, let me just throw more at you and more and more.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to really hold carefully to be careful about how I handled all of it.
Yeah.
And it was really cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. And I also we kind of came together and were trying to kind of help the guy that introduced us, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So he didn't just hear my perspective and then obviously yours. It's we were trying to.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
That was so cool.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so I kind of want to start with how your, I guess, appeal with the Bible and Christianity came about. So we can start, if you want, with a little bit about your background, maybe where you're from, family, siblings, and if you recall early introduction into Christianity.
Yeah.
Kind of build a little framework there.
Cool. So yeah, I know I have. It kind of reminds me similar to you, mixed family. So I have 3 older brothers. They come from a different mom, and they have 2 little sisters. So altogether, there's 6 of us. And I always tell people I'm the youngest of all the boys. I'm the oldest of my mom's kids. I'm right in the middle of the family, of all my brothers and sisters.
Nice. Okay.
So I like to think I'm the oldest, youngest, the middle sometimes.
Yeah, because I'm the oldest of my moms, but I'm like the middle because I have two
Yeah.
siblings. So you kind of get like the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And
or in your case, all three.
Yeah. And so, I thought about this, and I remember around 5 or 6, I was at VBS, and they would like give out little stickies, and they would ask you like, when did you become a Christian? And I remember saying I was a Christian at 2 years old, and that I remember like as a 2-year-old someone asked if I believed in God or something, and I remember professing like, oh, I believe in God.
Really?
Like 2, and I don't know if that's even true, but I remember at VBS, my memory is clear that I was having like a sticky and like doing a presentation, letting everyone know, yeah, I was a Christian since 2, and being like proud of that.
What is VPS?
VBS, yeah, so like Vacation Bible School.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so and I went there a few times, but yeah, I remember like that's my earliest memory of being like really about God.
Okay.
Like so much that I was already like, yeah, I believe in God since I was 2, and my dad was a pastor. My dad has 5 other brothers, so and altogether there's 8 of them, and between him and his 5 other brothers, almost all of them are pastors of churches. And so for us, church was just like a big thing in the family.
Yeah.
Christianity was a big thing. God was always talked about all the time. So our family comes from Anthony, New Mexico, which is like a little town that's in between New Mexico and Texas, and it's just north of Mexico, not very far. And so we were very Hispanic, like all Spanish-speaking churches, and all of them grew up in that whole area. And so Anthony, New Mexico, my dad would actually say that in Anthony, New Mexico, you're either part of the gangs or you're part of the church. And he said he didn't know which one was worse. And just to give you like an idea of like where we started to come from, but yeah, my dad was a pastor of pastors. My dad was famous in the family, famous in his community, everywhere around there. Around 18, 19, he knew the Bible better than most people. And he was already getting put into like pastor positions, which was difficult for people there because he was so young.
Yeah.
But he knew the Bible so well. Like he was able to recite many, many verses, understand the context of things. And so everyone just assumed like he has the spirit of interpretation.
Interesting. Okay. And he was also like, I guess, kind of a good storyteller, being able to like kind of derive the meaning and then creating something where it applies to current situations.
Oh yeah. And just very like gentle, and so he would give good advice, and he was just also he basically was a man of his word, so he walked that walk, and everyone just consistently saw it over and over and over again.
Wow.
So yeah, I would growing up, I remember as a young Christian, like the thing that I remember the most was like the end times and understanding that and learning it and being excited, and also being like disappointed because I was taught like you're gonna be raptured and you're not gonna experience those tribulations, and being a little disappointed. And I remember my family knew that I was like kind of disappointed I wasn't gonna be part of that, and wishing like that's like the most exciting, craziest time where the world is going through the most amazing things and I'm not gonna see it. And so like I remember as a young Christian being like really about that, like revelations and prophecy was a big deal to me. But the big thing that I remember like just influenced me so much was my dad taught me about faith and how like I wouldn't, once I had it, I couldn't lose it, and like God's love would never like get away from me, and he would never like turn his back on me. And I remember that, I think as like a 7-8-year-old, kind of just like shocked me and was just so interesting. And like I almost want to tell all my friends about it. Like this is such a cool thing. You guys should learn about this. This is like love and forgiveness and all these ideas, and it all made perfect sense. To me, it just explained the world really well.
Okay. Okay, so you were fascinated with like the unconditional love aspect, and you were aware that at a young age that nothing could really separate you from that love.
Yeah. In fact, there was that like once saved, always saved that we were being taught that other Christians would like critique and say that there's issues with. Like you could say we were almost like extreme about it, where we just really felt like we will never be disconnected, so we don't ever have to worry.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. And then you also touched on the fact that you kind of started with Revelation, with end times, with prophecy.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
that really, I think that's what like got me like the most fascinated.
Okay.
I was trying to understand prophecy. Like I understood faith to the limited amount I could at that time. But then prophecy and the end times were just like it was like these puzzles to go and solve. And so I was always messing with them, always reading Revelation, and that just got me so excited. I remember being like 9 to 13 years old, just constantly looking at documentaries about comets coming and how that could possibly be like an end times prophecy thing. And so yeah.
Okay, so this is like your world from as early as you can remember.
Yeah,
it's like Christianity. Dad's a pastor. The uncles are a pastor.
Yeah.
The whole kind of field is people in the church. You went to vocational Bible school a little bit here and there. So I want to know like what type of church your dad was at originally, and then how that's kind of progressed or changed. I know he wasn't always in the same church.
Right.
You know, there was some difficulties there. So why don't we talk about that?
Yeah, so it was Pentecostal. That's what the church he was in.
Okay.
Pentecostal. It was my uncle that got him into my uncle kind of got our family into the church. And then, you know, we had already been Christian into church before, like my grandma's father, things like that. But my uncle kind of got us all into it, and my dad at a young age was getting into it. I know my dad would always tell me he really became a Christian at 18. And so like that's when he got really serious about everything. But he was Pentecostal, Assemblies of God church.
Okay.
And our community in that area was with like when I was little, growing up, the one thing I always learned was legalism. That was like the term that was always around me, which was like extreme strictness to the law, people being judgmental and judging others, and how church can have those issues. And so my dad basically saw that all over the place, and then that was a big struggle in our whole family. Was some family members were less legalist, more towards grace. Others are more legalist, more towards like you have to do works to be saved. And so it was like a big division in the family. And it's just like a slow, it took a long time for us to all kind of come to an agreement and just kind of be okay with how we all see things. But we all slowly, basically over time, came more to the side of, okay, we understand we're saved by grace. And like we all learned that, and like that became a big part of all of us.
Okay, so you believe that once you profess this faith in Christ, or surrender or baptized or whatever, that is it. No matter what else happens here on earth, like you're saved. You're okay. Yeah,
once if it's sincere, like if you sincerely open your heart to God, I don't think you can really close that anymore. Where you're like, you sincerely open your heart, and now later you decide, actually I'm gonna shut that door on you, and now I'm done.
So okay. So what would you say to, because I know a lot of people kind of go in and out of the faith, and then there's people that were raised in the more legalistic religion aspect, and then they kind of reject it as they get older. And so what would you say to the people that are on fire like throughout their childhood? They truly believe in Christianity, they're walking with Christ, they're doing all the things, and there's a change of heart, I guess, or disruption. Like I've seen it with like worship singers and people like that, where it's like, oh yeah, they're totally for God, like their life is evident of that. You can judge them by their fruits. And then it's like there's a statement that comes out or something. It's like, well, I'm actually not that. And so it's not like they are saying they're one thing and then secretly doing something else. Like they're not being just deceptive or anything like that. Like it's a clear, I was this, now I'm this.
Yeah, they felt like they were ever that, right? Like they believe I was fully in this. One thing I think about a lot is there's a lot of disillusionment with the people around them, and that might be a big factor. And so they're disillusioned by like they're believing in God and they're trying to do these things, but they're seeing corruption around them. That's kind of what happened with my dad and my uncles, was they were seeing a lot of corruption, and it's not necessarily church, but it was the people that were there, and it wasn't all of them. There was tons of good people, but it was just they were seeing pastor being corrupt, followers being corrupt, a lot of judgmental, a lot of lies, and I think it slowly was wearing on them, and some people just started to get away from all of it. So the first thing I would do with anyone like that is I would try to talk to them and see if that could be like a big issue. And so, I've had conversations with people pretty recently where they told me that they went to church and they had these experiences and they just feel like it was, not a good thing, and they don't feel close to God at all. And I would remind them, like, well, was that church? Like, was it the church you went to that maybe helped that? Or do you think it was your connection with God? But I try to kind of separate, like, maybe it was the people that you were dealing with, not God, not the Bible. And then if they say, no, my issue is with God and the Bible, then it's like, okay, let's talk about that. Maybe you have issues with the Bible. Maybe you have issues with how you feel how God has dealt with you in life. So let's talk about that. So I feel like the first thing is, like, let's get away from people. And let's like not think about people influencing you. And if you really are taking it on people who've been bad influences, let's like deal with that and talk about it. But after that, then it's like, let's talk about, do you have an issue with the Bible and the way it teaches, or do you have an issue with how you think God has worked in your life? Let's talk about those instead.
Okay, so drawing like a clear line and figuring out what is what.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good starting spot? Okay. So I want to kind of go back a little bit. Entering into like adulthood, like teenage years, entering into adulthood, I think a lot of people are finding the faith for themselves.
Yeah.
Like in these times, we're really questioning things. We're developing fully in mind and body. And so I kind of want to touch on that for you, because you, from as early as you can remember, like this was kind of your world. And so did you ever step away from it? Did you branch out into other religions? Were you agnostic, atheist? And then how do you, well, let's just start with that one question.
Yeah, well, and I was listening to your video, and I felt like it was just very similar. He talked about like a lot of secular partying, right? And yeah, I feel like that happened to me a lot, where there's this discussion with Christians about when you believe in grace and that you're saved, some people can get to the point where they're like, I'm so sure of this that I'm kind of not going to put any effort, and I don't have to really think about it. Like, I know I'm saved, I know I'm loved by God, so I'm just going to live my life and not think about God as much. And I've seen that with family members of mine. I've seen that with other people, that they just feel so secure that they're not really putting any effort because they don't really feel they need to. And for me personally, as I got older, around 15 to 18, I actually remember that I just kept wanting to focus on relationships. Like, I really wanted a girlfriend, I really wanted friends. And I think that slowly was dividing me to the point where, I was thinking about it recently, actually, that I remember when I finished college, and college also had an influence, that it was just a lot of people and forces trying to push on you, different sciences, different things. And I was very interested in everything. I was interested in all the sciences, all the psychologies, all the different ideas. I love looking into atheism. I love looking into the YouTube videos about how they would explain why they thought Christianity was wrong, and I like to debunk them. So I was always watching atheist videos, and I was always getting into all of that. And so I remember, in college, when I finished college, I didn't realize at the time, but I was already getting away, and I was just not paying attention to what I should have been doing. One simple thing that I remember was that my brother and me both tried to get the same job at the Metropolitan Courthouse here in Albuquerque. And my brother wanted to get it on his own. So he applied, I think, 2 or 3 times before he asked my dad for help, because my dad knew people who worked there. And I remember when I finished college, I wanted money. Like, I just was like, I don't want to try really hard and earn this. I just need money. I want to get away from my family. Like, I want to live on my own. I want to start doing my own thing. And I remember asking my dad, like, can you, like, the very first time, like, I want to apply for this job, but I also want your help. Like, I don't want to wait if I don't have to. And so I remember he helped me, and I got that job. But in hindsight, I realized, like, I was already making bad decisions. I was already not thinking about God and doing things the right way. I was wanting to make shortcuts. I was wanting to be on my own. And so I actually remember there was a time when I was in college, and I wasn't into drinking. I wasn't into smoking weed or doing any drugs, because I just felt like it was gross. A lot of my family didn't do it. So my cousins who were my age and older, who were doing other fun things, they wouldn't do any of that stuff. So it was like a really good influence. But I remember I was just so lost in wanting to make friends and wanting to have a girlfriend and doing all these things, that I actually remember there was a specific day that I was like just in tears and just tired of like struggling. and I had friends who would tell me about parties, like, oh, there's these parties where we're gonna have girls and we're gonna have drinking and all these things, and I would always say no. And I remember this one friend who he would come up to me and be like, hey man, we should just hang out, like we should just go to a bar and get a beer, and that one would be like mess with me because I would always thought, well, I could do that. That's not that big a deal. Like it's a very wholesome thing, just like me and this person hanging out. And so I remember this one night being so tired, so overwhelmed that I was like, I decided I was okay to drink now. Like I was already over 21, but I decided I'm not gonna avoid drinking because I want friends. And I think that mind change was just out of like weakness and just wanting, like just being exhausted.
Okay, and so at this time, it sounds like you were not, like, you said 18 to 21?
Yeah, I was like probably about 20, like 19 to 21 was
Okay.
during all this time when I was really trying to make friends and really trying to, figure out what to do and getting to that point when I was like, okay, I'm gonna start to drink.
Okay. And so you're probably not, correct me if I'm wrong, like plugged into a church, going to like youth nights, Bible study.
Yeah, that's one thing that was very important was I had my family who was always there for me. So I had community, but I was not being honest with them. Like I was almost dividing myself because I was one person around my family, one person around the people I knew, and then I was a different person at school. And I was, realizing like, oh, I was keeping everything separate. And so I was starting to become like two different people, and I wasn't trusting my family enough to tell them, like, I feel lonely or I need help, and I just didn't trust them to reach out to them. Because I think if I had, they would have been there for me.
Sure.
But I just didn't want to, and I wanted like the kind of like the appealing fruit, right? Of like the new people and new friends and new experiences, new adventures, and to me, it's just like that seemed more fun. And so I was like, I wanted to go in that direction.
Okay, you wanted to go in that direction, but you didn't want to like be rejected or labeled as something different, because I assume you got, maybe this is the wrong word, but like rewarded for being the Christian Sam in your family. You know what I mean? And then that's like you're no longer portraying that person as you branch out into other friend groups and other forms of temptation and sin and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I kind of wanted to touch on like the struggle that we just kind of outlined. So there's probably a lot of people around the world that are in kind of like a similar boat.
Right.
And so what would your advice be to finding security when it feels like you can't trust other people? It feels like you're lonely in Christ.
Yeah.
Right? Because you were in Christ a little bit, and then, we're still not being fulfilled in whatever way that you wanted to, which it sounds like was with friends,
right?
Mostly. And
so like I was feeling unfulfilled, but I still knew about Christ, right? Well, one thing that I realized in hindsight was that I was really stuck on this idea like I can figure this out. I can get myself out of my own problems. I'm gonna, make my friends, and I'll meet a girl, and I'll do all the right things, and I would read books, and I would learn stuff, and I was just like, I'll solve this. Like I can make it happen. And I think that was a huge obstacle in my way. Was constantly thinking like I will figure out how to get out of this pit, and instead of realizing like, oh, I need to go to God. So I think that was a huge thing. And if someone felt like they're still going to God, but they still feel like, deeply unsatisfied, like, a lot of times it's that impatience of like, I want a partner, but I'm not finding a partner, and I gotta just keep trusting in God. And I think it's just really, what's helping me with everything is just remembering Jesus and what he went through. Remembering like, my suffering is tough, but his suffering was harder, and he did it for all these good reasons, and like I am going through suffering for good reasons too. I'm going through tough things, but it's because that's what we're meant to go through here, right? Like you shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, because I have conquered the world. And so it's like, okay, that helps me to like ground myself when I'm going through overwhelming things. It's just like, I've got to remember what you went through.
Yes. Okay. So it sounds like remembering the promises of God, what his word says, and kind of putting them above what we think and what we feel.
Yeah.
Because I think you touched on a good point, is there's probably a lot of people around the world I think they're confused and worried, right?
Yeah.
Like that was, you mentioned earlier the relationship thing.
Yeah.
Like that was me for a long time too, was just wanting a wife, wanting like a certain type of friend group, and with those friends we do, you know, certain types of activities, and like I kind of had this frame for my life, this picture that I want.
Yeah.
White picket fence,
Yep.
you know, 401k, all that. And so how do we remember, like, even if we don't get any of that, that still God is enough? Like how do we move past that? Because I think a lot of people have these healthy ambitions.
Yeah.
They want to be mothers and fathers, good husbands and wives. They want to raise up kids in the faith and, you know, be of service and you know, do their part. And even though those are good, like, things to strive for,
Right.
it doesn't always happen on our timetable. It doesn't happen the way that we desire it, and the waiting period can be very challenging. And so how do we remember, like, even if none of that stuff happens, that it's fine, he's enough?
Yeah, I think you know, reading the Bible helps a lot, and talking to God helps a lot. And you know, there's a lot of verses that jump into my mind, and I might even be misunderstanding some of them. But there's verses about like the eunuchs and the widows who will have lots of kids, and remembering like this is not the whole world. Like my life is right now is a small part of my whole life. And right now I want, you know, to be married and have kids, but God promises like the eunuch, the widows, you know, the women who are childless and barren, like one day they will have so many kids running up to them, and they will be mothers of so many, countless. And so things like that help me remember, like, okay, this is not, I'm just getting stuck in this little piece of life, of like human world, and forgetting that there's way more. Yeah, I think that helps a lot. Just, and you know, remembering Paul when he was in prison, and you know, Philippians, when he talks about, you know, he figured out just how to be happy in all instances. And I think, okay, that's something that's capable for all of us. One that I think about a lot is that's really helped me a lot personally for things that I've gone through is in James. I think it's chapter 1, where he says, you know, if you go through tribulations or trials, consider it pure joy. And every time I think about that, it's like, I just think it's crazy. Like, how can I be going through this stuff and be thinking this is pure joy? I should be purely happy right now. But I feel like that's been something I've been thinking about a lot. Is I should have pure joy because all of this is refining me, and it is making me a better person. And realizing after more time, I think one thing, my cousin told me this recently. He wishes he would just tell himself when he was younger, like, just to chill and just be patient. Because as time goes on, things start to be clearer. And I think that happens to me a lot. Like, as I've gotten older, I've seen God work in me enough times. I've seen things happen that now I'm more patient and more okay with my situation. Because I know God is working again. Like, he's making something happen. And I've seen it happen a lot before. So just wait a little longer and we'll see how things happen.
Okay, that brings up another good point, is like identifying the familiarity with like your walk in Christ. So it's like, oh, I've been here before.
Yeah.
I've had these feelings before. I've been in, you know, similar situations, and you know, in X amount of days, it typically turns into this. So how do I apply that to this situation that kind of keeps repeating itself? Or on the opposite side, it's like dealing with maybe the same types of temptation, and knowing how to identify it and to get out of it and not commit it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's very interesting, because there are like a lot of, like, feelings are very powerful, and like emotions and stuff like that, and your thoughts. And so sometimes it's like, if you haven't experienced it before, or like in the same fashion, it's like, how do you navigate through it, or how do you get out of it? You know what I mean?
Right.
It can seem like that.
Right.
And then typically you do, and you're like, oh, okay, I should have identified this, or I should have, you know, not done this, because once I do that, then this happens, or something like that. So that's a very good point. Okay. Because there are like a bunch of things that, you know, kind of happen in life that don't really foresee or anything like
Right.
that. Yeah.
And it gets overwhelming.
Yes, it gets very overwhelming. You mentioned Paul, and one other thing I wanted to mention on that is because he had like his Damascus Road moment with the Lord.
Right.
And so it seems to me like he's able to kind of see bigger picture stuff. He's obviously like filled with the Holy Spirit. He's going out all over the world, great evangelist or missionary or whatever you want to call him.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the people that haven't like experienced the Lord, and then we're still telling like consider it joy, or look past it, look to the future, look to heavenly things.
Right.
You know what I mean? But
they
especially
when they haven't been grounded in grace and love.
Yeah, or even like they do have a foundation in Christ, but it's just like they haven't had that I don't know, big moment with the Lord or something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't recommend this for people because it was just what helped me a lot. I was a very logical person, so, or at least I'd like to think I am logical, because I remember, when I was young, I was really into like UFOs, and I thought I loved UFOs, and at some point it just clicked in my head that I didn't need to see a UFO to believe in them.
Mm-hmm.
And then it clicked in my head like that's the way it is for God. Like I don't need to see God working in my life to not to believe in Him. And it made me feel blessed and just like strong in my faith at that time, at that young age, of just I don't need to have an external miracle or some external proof for me to believe in God and His love and the way everything works, the way He talks about how we should act. It all made enough sense of like, yes, I just gotta keep going in this direction. And what helped a lot was I would look at other avenues and I would look at other roads and just look at different perspectives and philosophies, and they all just would come short, and I would just not be able to see any reason why I should leave God and Jesus. It's like, no, this just makes more sense. This is just way better. There's more answers that I have with this than with anything else. Nothing else to give me more answers.
Yeah.
And so that helped a lot too. But it is tough when people are going through that. And I think really you just gotta reach out for help. When people are going through those things, they should reach out for help, and I think that's what I should have done a lot of times when I felt overwhelmed. And you can go to God, or you can go to your loved ones and start letting them know, I need help, I need support, I can't do this anymore.
Okay.
But yeah, I would say you really do need to keep trying to talk to God, because eventually He does work in your life. And so just gotta be patient, but really keep talking to Him.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned like 18 to 21, you're kind of branching out, doing your own thing a little bit. And then how does that progress, or what is like your pivotal point with that? And then how do you kind of change directions, or what happens following that?
For me, it felt like the prodigal son story, because I was always close to God in some way. I was always learning the Bible. I was always close to my family. But there was times where I was just getting away a little more, and I was just wanting to do other things. I was focusing on relationships. I was focusing on friendships. I was focusing on fun a lot. Like that was a big thing. I was just trying to have fun, trying to chase after a new good experience. And I actually felt very calm at the time. I felt very relaxed. I felt very like free spirited, and it took a while for that to eventually get to some point where I realized it was getting to a dead end. But eventually, I remember I moved to Austin, Texas, to start traveling around the country, and I wanted to go travel, and I wanted to go have fun, and I wanted to just live like this adventurous life. And I was in Austin, Texas for about 2 years, and I have family in Austin. I had family members over there. I had friends in Austin, but I didn't really have a lot of Christian people there, and I didn't have a good foundation there. And I just got like lost in work. Like all I was doing was working nonstop. I was trying to get into like a relationship with someone that wasn't good for me. And I remember just I was getting deep into atheism, like constantly watching videos on atheism, constantly watching videos about different political and philosophical views, and I was kind of getting lost in all that stuff. So I was about 25, around 25, where I was just like, I couldn't figure out anything anymore, and I was kind of losing all my beliefs, because I wanted to have like the perfect foundation. I wanted to be like completely sure that Jesus was real, or any political belief I had was completely grounded in like science and studies. So I was trying so hard to do that. And I remember the deeper I would go into anything, the more it would get vague. And I just, any political thing, any scientific thing, and anything biblical, it just would get to a point where it was like now seeming vague. Any critiques atheists would have, I would feel like, I don't know, like I would be able to clean it up pretty well and understand like this is wrong, but then there's always a little bit of doubt that was left. And I was always getting more and more doubt, and I just felt kind of lost. And I think there was this moment where I was actually watching Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, and with Dave Rubin, and there's this one YouTube video. It was like an hour and 30 minutes long, and I watched that video like 7 or 8 times, and I just would watch it because they were just talking about God and Judaism, Christianity, and I just kept watching it over and over again. And what helped me at that time, which I find really weird, was that I just got to this point where I realized I can't know everything enough 100%. Like I can't be certain 100% of something. So it has to be a leap of faith. Even if it's atheism or science or anything, evolution, whatever it was, there would have to be this little leap of faith into like, well, I didn't look at every single article. I didn't look at every single, proof. So I'm going to just decide to believe in this by, from everything I know so far. And so it basically got to a point where I realized I have to believe in what I want to believe, even though I don't have enough 100% assurance. And that was faith. And I think watching that video with Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro just made me realize there's nothing else that I would want to believe. Even if I was an atheist and this isn't real, it makes my life too good. And I'm just tired of being confused. And I was like, everything has been pointing me in this direction. Nothing is even close. And I decided I'm just going to start believing this. I'm not going to listen to any more atheist videos. I'm not going to try to argue and debunk everything. And I remember I was really struggling. Like I was just really lost for that whole time. I was a lot more confused. And for me, the biggest breaking moment was when I was driving back home to Albuquerque from Austin, Texas. My cousin had just passed away recently, very, very recently. And I remember I thought about this recently and I was getting emotional about it. I hadn't thought about it in a long time. But I called my dad and I actually asked him, I had been a Christian for my whole life. I knew the Bible. I was always learning more. And I just asked him, can you review how you talk to God again? Can you just give me explain that again? And I just felt so embarrassed that I felt like I was telling him something I didn't want to tell him at all. And he was very, very gentle and just like, oh yeah, and he just started explaining it to me. And I don't even remember what he said, but I know that it was very simple. Just like you just talk to him, and you just let your feelings out and tell him what you're going through, what you're thinking about. And I remember that was very tough for me to do that. And it was while I was driving back home I told him that. And when I got home, there was a funeral that was happening. It might have been the next day, something like that. But we had tons of family come for that funeral, and it felt like just a big welcoming for me, where I felt like I was seeing all my family that I hadn't seen in a long time, and it just felt like so much assurance that this is what I've been missing for so long. This is what I need to have been in. I'm in the right direction now. And just led from there.
So were you already moving back from Austin on your drive home, or you were just coming home for the funeral?
No, I had gone through a lot of crazy stuff. I actually had gotten out of a relationship, and I basically decided I don't want to be here in Austin. And it had been something that was happening for a while. I was actually really miserable there, and I would actually say it, and it was crazy, but it was actually the first time I found out about it. I was very drunk, and I had told someone that I wanted to go home and I wanted to be back in Albuquerque. And then she didn't tell me that until 2 months later. And then she told me, yeah, when we were having that one time together, you had mentioned that you wanted to go back to Albuquerque. And me, sober at the time, realized, I kind of do want to go back to Albuquerque. But me, drunk 2 months ago, knew it. And then once she told me that, it kind of clicked in my head, I do want to go home. And then after that, it just kind of led to everything just kept leading to yeah, it's time to go home.
Okay, so there were a bunch of signs that were pointing you in that direction. Yeah. And so I assume home, it kind of seems like home was back to Christianity, back to the Lord, but also back to your family, back to your roots, back to the Christian Sam that we had talked about earlier. Okay. And so this was like a big like building period in the faith, right? I think a lot of people go through this where I went through this in a similar way where it's like just existential crisis, panic attacks, because I couldn't be 100% sure. Right. And it's like crippling, like chronic anxiety all the time until you get to the point where it's like there's that leap of faith. Right? There's that small percentage of faith. And for me, I know like I think sometimes one of the ways that I would comfort myself is like think of all the things that God had done in my past and just like try to remember those things, or like in your situation, think of like valid good arguments for the faith or whatever topic you're discussing within the faith. And try to like remember those things, which can help for a little bit. But yeah, it's like at some point you got to give a little bit, even if there's overwhelming amounts of evidence and experiences in your lives and the lives of family and friends. At some point, it's like there's got to be like a little bit of a jump. Yeah. And so you had the faith. It sounds like growing up, but then you kind of lost it there for a few years.
You know, and it's one of those things. Like I feel like I didn't ever stop talking to God. I didn't ever get to the point where I didn't know I was a Christian anymore. It just felt like a lot of doubt was creeping in, and I was getting filled with more and more doubt. And really, the doubt was tiny. It was like, you know, if I can find this one little piece of doubt, then maybe I'm not really sure, because it's not 100% sure. And I was looking at these like 1% little tiny things, and then I realized like, I don't need to be doing that. And then, you know, once I like decided to stop and like really commit and like you said, basically take that leap of faith, then I kind of felt like all those issues disappeared. All those issues that I had started to go away. And then what the craziest thing was that the assurance that I had, like the points, the arguments, I felt like they got clearer after that. And it just felt like everything was more clear. And then it was like, wow, now I have responses to all those arguments that I was struggling with a long time ago. And now I just feel so good about all of it.
Yeah, okay. That's a good point. I think, because I think a lot of people will kind of hone in on certain Bible verses or try to like justify it 100%. And because there are things in the Bible that I think a lot of us just, we either fully don't understand or fully can't comprehend, but we do know certain things which are like foundational. We know God is good, we know He's merciful, we know He's just and wise and stuff like that, right? So it's like, well, if we know that 100%, then the things that we know 80-85%, like it's okay, because we know these things 100%, you know. Okay, so then you come back, you're like in your mid-20s, 26-ish?
About 25, 26.
Okay.
It was 2019. It was like around March of 2019.
Okay.
Right before COVID happened.
All right, and then you come back, you're with your family. And what does that kind of look like as that unfolds, that transition?
I mean, I'm so glad you asked that, because you reminded me of something, which was, you know, a long time before I was working with my dad and my brother at their little office that they had, like a little law firm. And so I was working with them again, getting paid very little, like very, very little. I was living in their house again, in my parents' house. So it felt like I basically became a kid again. Like, you know, now I was living on my own, doing my own thing. Now I'm living in the house with my parents, working on my dad's business again. And it just felt so perfect. Like it felt like humbled and just being happy where I'm at now. Like I have way less money than I had before. You know, I think it was about $125 a week that my dad would pay me. And I would like just figure out how to use that money.
A week?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so it was just like, so was that like $250, $500 a month?
Yeah.
So yeah, I was really careful with that money, but I didn't really need that much money because I already had my living situation. You know, it was okay. So, but what was really cool is I remember something that really impacted me heavy was you know, I was having those deep Bible talks and just like really good talks about everything with my dad and my brother, which like I probably missed that more than anything that I had experienced. Having those fun talks about everything we wanted to talk about. And I remember one time my dad was actually posing a question to us, and to this day I haven't been able to figure out the right way to ask this question, because he was telling us this is a hard question to ask. The question was harder than figuring out the answer. And the question was, what would you want with your child that's going to happen? Like if your wife is pregnant and you're going to have a child, what would you want with that child? Because you don't want to say, what do you want for them? Because then people will jump to think like, I want them to be happy, I want them to be healthy. And so you don't really want to say, what do you want with them? Because when I ask you, what do you want with your child? Like if you are going to have a child, what would you want with them above all else? What would you think?
With them?
Yeah.
Like I'm involved? Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I guess like hopefully I could be involved in some way. It doesn't matter if I'm not. Just like the journey toward the cross with them.
Yeah, and you see, I think that's actually the perfect answer, and that's why we would talk about it a lot. Is like if you use that word with them, it kind of leads people really quickly to the answer. But if you ask them, what do you want for them, it kind of leads them away. And I remember me and my brother were trying to answer the question, and my dad told me, what I would want the most with my child is a relationship. That's what God wants the most, is a relationship. Like more than you being happy or healthy, he wants to get to know you. And the way he explained it to me is like, it's like your grandparent, and it made me think of my grandma. It's like your grandparent is there at home where she can't really travel, she's much older, and she's just waiting for you to visit her. And all she wants is for you to visit her. And whenever you visit her, she'll be so happy. And it's really just up to you whenever you want to go. And I remember as he was telling us that idea and that story, I was just like tears running down my face. And like I was there with my brother and my dad, and they were both just like talking while they were noticing like I just had tears running. Like I wasn't crying, making sounds, I just had tears like nonstop running down. And it was like, that was a big moment of just realizing like, yeah, that's what I needed and I want is more closeness to God. And yeah, that was just such a cool moment. And so yeah, everything in my life was just like back to basics, back to the family, back to, the most simple job. And it was just like slowly rebuilding and going back up from there.
Okay. And so that was, you said 2019, so like 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
And so you've kind of been building that foundation back up again.
Yeah, and it goes up and down.
Sure.
Ways. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of different life circumstances and things that can happen. Something that I think you do very well is, maybe you kind of learned this from your dad and your uncles and your brother and stuff like that, is being able to kind of articulate the faith and share it almost without even, like the person doesn't even know that you're sharing like a faith, or you're kind of answering questions, giving advice, where it's like, what the heck did he just do? Like what happened? You know what I mean? And so I kind of want to touch on that, because you had mentioned like just before we started recording, you had an old student of yours contact you, and I think you're very, very good with that, like articulating your words, kind of encouraging or giving the right advice. And so does that kind of stem from your dad, and how are you kind of walking out that role, that opportunity?
Yeah, I love that question. I think I have a cousin. He is like a big mentor to me. He's very tough on me all the time. And he really pushed on me and other people around him is like, eventually our parents are going to get older. And this was a long time ago. And he's like, we need to be doing more. We need to be taking up the mantle that they created an amazing foundation for us.
Yes.
He's like, we need to keep building on top of that. And I remember he was always getting on me about like, your dad owns like a small law firm. Like this is a great business. You should be working that business. You should be taking over that mantle. Like, why would you even be thinking about other career options when your dad created something so awesome for you to help with? And yeah, I would think about it a lot, but it made me realize, he was right. Like I want to take over what my dad kind of created, and my dad above all else, it was the Bible. He was, he was a pastor in that area of like Juarez, Anthony, New Mexico, all that area. He had a Christian radio show at one point. He had a Christian TV show for a little bit. He had a little Christian rock band. They would go to different churches. Like the Bible and God was his whole life. And so it really made me realize like, okay, this is what I want to get better at. More than anything, this is what I want to get better at. And yeah, so like my dad really influenced me a lot to do that. And I think a big part was just, I really wanted people to listen to me speak. And I never really felt I got that much. So I really would show people like a lot of attention and listen to them. And I think that helped a lot. And like recently with that person who I was talking to, I remember the phone call was about an hour and 20 minutes. And I remember about an hour of it was him just talking the whole time. And just him expressing all of his stresses, all of his worries. And I was just listening to him kind of lead the conversation towards God. And we were talking for about 40 minutes before he even mentioned God. And then he just started bringing up God a little bit at the end about his issues with his two religions and trying to figure out what he needs to be believing in. And he knows he needs to do something about it. And the whole time, I just kept praying nonstop, like, God, help me to say the right thing. Like, this is a very spiritual, important moment. I don't want to take care of it. I don't want to mess this up. And I kept asking God, like, God, please don't let me say something wrong. Please let me say the right thing. And, I just kept staying quiet because he kept talking. And by the time he kind of had got a lot of it out, he was already talking a lot about God. He was already talking about his existential issues. And so by the time I finally had anything to say, it was like he had already laid all the groundwork for me. And I remember I just started bringing up some simple things to him and talking to him about, that it's when we are at our weakest, that's when we are actually at our strongest. That's when we start asking God for help. And yeah, I just remember that there was a few other things I talked to him about, but he did feel good at the end. And I think a big part of it was he let out so much energy, but then he could tell I was paying attention to everything he was saying. For that whole hour, I was listening to all the stuff he was saying. Then I just told him a few things, and I think he kind of felt like, yeah, you were listening to me, you understand what I'm going through, and yes, God is something I need to focus on. And yeah, so I think that helped a lot. It's just, really, this happens all the time now, is I just pray to God constantly. When people are talking, asking me something, or I start feeling like there's a spiritual moment happening, I just start asking God, please help me, please, like, don't let this opportunity go to waste. And I think that's been helping me a lot.
Yeah, because that can be challenging, because sometimes it's like, oh, we've studied the Bible, or, oh, I know the answer to this, I know what to say in this moment, I'm going to do it on my own.
Right.
But you're saying the opposite. You're saying, I have no idea what this person's going through, or I don't know, if I don't want to say the wrong thing, you speak through me.
Yeah.
You use me, yeah. Did you ever flirt with being a pastor?
Oh, yeah, I've thought about it a lot. And I have family members that tell me, and they push me to do it and talk to me about it. And it's just very difficult because my dad was very, everything he taught me was like, just be very careful with that, I can't remember exactly where it is, but I think it's in Timothy where he mentions like, not everyone should be doing this because it's a very, very responsible role. You're going to be put in a position where you're going to take on a lot of responsibility, and you need to really be serious about that. And so I think we should all take it very serious and be very careful about jumping into it.
Yeah, we touched a little bit about that on the last episode, because you're right, pastors have like a whole other level. There's a lot of eyes on them, and they're leading the sheep, right? We are being spiritually fed through them, and they can really like make or break a lot of people. And so there's like a heightened responsibility, duty, obligation. Okay. And so your dad kind of made that aware, and so because sometimes I think that you talk to so many different people, like you're very not outspoken, but outgoing, very extroverted. I feel like you can talk to anyone anytime. And so you're always like, it feels like you're kind of having these spirit-led conversations like all the time in your life.
More now than before. Where I just feel like it does happen more. And and then I can tell. Then all of a sudden I start getting cocky, and I start thinking I know more, and something will happen that just makes me look dumb, and me, other people might not even notice it, but I notice it. I'm like, yep, I need to be humbled, and I catch it a lot, where I just realize, yep, I said something wrong, I shouldn't have done that. I started getting cocky, and God just goes and like humbles me quick, and that helps me a lot.
Yeah, it definitely helps me too, because there's like this fine little, almost like dance that we're doing with the Lord on a day-to-day basis, right? And so if we start, rejecting those little voices or those little Holy Spirit convictions over and over and over again, then that can kind of lead us down a really bad path.
Yeah.
Obviously, but if you're like hyper aware of them and you're listening and you're looking, then it's just like you're truly kind of being guided by Him in every single situation, which is like the best thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's funny because actually I got a big part of it from you too, because I remember you were talking about how I think I might have misunderstood, but you were like, I wake up and I practice stillness. And I was just like, wow, I've never done that. Just trying to be still and listen to God's voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, it was very like inspiring. Like, and you're so young when it comes to your faith with God, and you're trying to do this so much that I was like, I want to do more. And so I think like I've had times where, I have a cousin or nephew who we're working on like floorboards or something, and he's trying to teach me how to do it. And all I want to do is be like, I know way more than you. And then realize like, just, stay humble and don't like he might be making a good point. And it's just very hard in those moments to be like, no, let's stay humble. And then half the time I realize, actually, I didn't know about that. You just taught me something I didn't know.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Is like everyone's kind of on like a different like faith journey. Right, different levels. And I know for me in the beginning was like, it was obviously really exciting, and I kind of turned into like the faith, kind of like policing people. Like especially my family. Like so, like my mom, she heard so much. My dad, even some of my siblings. But then you kind of like mature, I guess, or there's like a maturation phase of the faith where you're kind of more patient, or like when you said like you're just not as quick to either like point out the faults or correct someone or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have people who will tell me things like, oh, Moses said this, and I'll be like, oh, that was Noah, little things like that, and I've gotten a lot better at just not trying to correct people for those little things. And I feel like that helps also.
Okay. Alrighty. I think we'll kind of end there unless there's more that you wanted to add. I know you had mentioned.
I could talk forever.
Yeah, right before we had jumped on, you had mentioned you kind of picked a few different things from your testimony that you wanted to share. Did we kind of touch on everything? I
think most of the big things. I mean, I think the crazy thing, because especially about like your testimony about getting close to God, it's always growing.
Yeah.
And so that my dad passed away in January of this year. Yeah. And so like that whole experience last year was crazy, and it's just such a crazy story. I feel like I could go on a whole thing about it. How it was in March that my dad, basically was getting really, really sick. And so there's so much to the story, but I want to say this one thing, which is that it's something I was thinking about recently. I remember that my dad never really would see spiritual things. Like he was not someone who would just like, oh, I saw an angel or God talk to me in my voice, in my head. He was very kind of grounded and logical. And he did have amazing experiences, like spiritual experiences, but he was not the kind of person to just talk about that like willy-nilly. And so I remember that I was seeing some cousins of mine, and my dad had just been slowly getting sicker, and I wasn't really noticing it, and we were kind of just thinking it was just a long-term cold or something. And I remember that my mom called me that night and told me, your dad said he saw an angel, and this is what's going on. And I think, basically just like this angel was talking to him about what he needs to do and things like that. And it just made me feel really nervous. Like I never heard that kind of talking from my dad. And I just remember that that night I was still living with that roommate that we met, and I remember that I decided to go to my house. I took some sheets and I just went home, and I just thought I should just be home. And I remember I decided just to sleep on the couch, so I went and slept on the couch, and I just find it really funny because my cousin, who likes to be tough on me, he was ready to get mad at me because he was already like, your dad's getting sicker. Where have you been? Like, you kind of aren't around. And so that night, I just stayed that night, and my mom came and told me, like, your dad is like we need to call the ambulance, like something's wrong with your dad, like he can't breathe. And I remember I went to go see him, and yeah, he was like gasping for air. It was like the worst way I ever saw him my whole life. And I remember the very first thing I did is I called my cousin, and the one that lives next door, and I called him and I said, hey David, can you come over? Like, my dad's not doing good. I don't even know what I told him, but I remember he always told me that he was so sure that I was calling him from, like, I was at a party or my car broke down, and I was gonna be like, hey, I just need your help or something. And so yeah, he came over, and then we called the ambulance and we took him to the hospital, and that, like a day or two later, we found out he had cancer. All these things happened, and it was like really bad cancer, but it made me feel so good to know like I was there at that moment. And I've had so many experiences like that has just made it so awesome.
Wow. Yeah, I'm glad you were there too. Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, I'd heard that story before, a little bit, not in the same way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm trying to imagine it, and it's got to be like a really tough situation. And I know it's been several months since, and you've learned a lot and you're growing and this and that, but it's a very challenging thing for like an experience here on earth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's one of your favorite people in the whole world.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sam, thank you very much for being here.
Yeah,
I appreciate your time and your openness and your honesty, and I look forward to talking with you again soon.
Absolutely, man.
Alrighty. Bye.